Alright, Shalom. First and foremost, I want to start off by giving all praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakah Kwadash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well. Peace and salutations unto the hopeful elect. Alright, this video will be entitled, You Have to Eat the Whole Rule, to understand the rule. Okay, you have to eat the whole rule to understand the rule. The rule being the book, the Bible, and eating the whole rule is studying it, to study the mysteries, all right, the dark sayings, the symbology, the parables. Okay, that means eating the whole rule, going into all these books, okay, in the Bible, including the Apocrypha. Okay, to understand, you can't, that's how you can understand the fullness of it. Okay, you can't pick and choose, which ones, sounding good, like these Christians, they don't go into prophecy, history, all that. They just go into, God love the whole world, which that, they break it down wrong. Okay, and not true. Okay, you have to go into the whole rule to understand it. Okay, and you have to have the Holy Spirit, the Rakah Kwadash, to even understand these scriptures first and foremost. But, this is a precept here. This is Sirach 39 and verse 1. It says, But he that giveth his mind to the law of the Most High, okay, to these scriptures, okay, and is occupied in the meditation thereof, the book, the meditation, the book, okay, as again, these scriptures, will seek out the wisdom of all the ancient, okay, the prophets of old, okay, and be occupied in prophecies, These Christians doesn't be occupied in prophecies, okay, because prophecies will tell you a lot, okay, the curses in Deuteronomy 28 and from 64 down to, and jumping down to 68, that's a prophecy saying that we will be scattered, okay, we was dispersed, okay, from our land, okay, that's prophecy, okay, in terms of rulership, all these like Book of Daniel, all these heathens rule, okay, why we not in power, and the main rule now who rule in Esau, Edom, certain prophecies like the MOTB, okay, could tell you why they bring in this digital system, okay, prophecies is important, okay, verse 2 it says, He will keep the sayings of the renowned men, and where subtle parables are, he will be there also, okay, certain parables will just be tricky, certain scriptures, books like Daniel, Revelation, okay, Ezekiel 37, the dry bones, those are subtle parables, okay, and you have to study to understand it. These Christians, you don't see these Christians going into these books, okay, okay, because they don't understand, they can't break it down, they don't study, okay, they just choose what they want, and don't choose to understand it, okay, but that's what we do here, all right, okay, verse 3 it says, He will seek out the secrets of grave sentences and be conversant in dark parables, okay, you have to eat the whole rule, okay, meaning these books too, go in these books, all right, these mysteries, okay, this is Revelation chapter 10 and verse 9, all right, okay, this is when John the Revelator, ate up the whole book, all right, Revelation chapter 10 verse 9, it says, and I went, Slakia, unto the angel and said unto him, Give me the little book. And he said unto me, Take it and eat it up, and it shall make thy belly bitter. Okay, and it shall be in thy mouth as sweet as honey. Okay, and I took the little book out of the angel's hand and ate it up, and it was slacky, and it was in my mouth sweet as honey. You know, the exciting parts of the scriptures, hearing. Okay, those parts are sweet as honey, and as soon as I eaten it, I had eaten it, my belly was bitter. The oppressive side, the harshness side of the scriptures. Okay, and then you'll begin to truly understand, the book. Okay, like we go into captivity, our enemies in rule. Okay, then you'll understand. Okay, these Christians don't choose to do that. Okay, they is like, do as thou will. Okay, but you have to go in the fullness of the scriptures. Okay, precept upon precept. All right, this is Isaiah 28, and let's see here in verse 9. It says, Whom shall he teach knowledge, and whom shall he make to understand doctrine? Them that are weaned from the milk and drawn from the breast. Okay, understanding the scriptures, again, that milk. Okay, the foundation. First, verse 10, it says, For precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little and there a little. Okay, so that's what you do to understand the scriptures. You have to go precept upon precept, okay, including the Apocrypha. The Apocrypha, fill in the missing puzzles, the puzzle pieces of the scriptures, the Bible. All right. Okay, so this is all you have to do, to understand, the fullness of the book. Okay, study to show yourself approved. This is 2 Timothy 2 and verse 15. It says, Study to show thyself approved unto power, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Okay, rightly breaking it down. For example, mystery Babylon, all these scriptures. Okay, so that's what you gotta do to understand the whole rule. Okay, this is Proverbs. Bear with me here, Proverbs 4 and verse 7. All right, wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding. That means going into the whole book. Okay, going into the whole scriptures. Okay, go into the dark sayings, then you'll truly understand. Okay, all right. So Lord's willing, this video was edifying. All right, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham Rakah Kodash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations unto the hopeful elect, Wa Abab Babal and Shalom.